Two men walked into a cafe. One of them was lively, chatting non-stop, gesturing with his hands, laughing out loud. His energy seemed to make the whole place revolve around him. The other man, quieter. He sat alone, his eyes distant, gazing through the window, a warm cup of coffee resting in his hand. He didn't say a word, and yet there was something about him that made the woman at the next table glance over, then glance again. It wasn't because he stood out. It was because he was present, in a way that was entirely his own. There's a truth that very few men are willing to believe right from the beginning. Women do not expect you to be perfect. They don't need you to look like a movie star. They don't need you to be wealthy enough to impress the room, and they certainly don't need you to act cool or elite. What they need is someone real and attuned. What moves a woman isn't your appearance, it's the feeling you create. And what's remarkable is, they sense that feeling very quickly, sometimes in just the first few seconds. The problem is, many men get it wrong. They think they need to do something big, something bold, to make an impression, but women don't observe the way men think they do. They're not captivated by bright, flashing lights. They're drawn to the subtle details, the things most men don't even notice, like the way you look at her, the way you smile, the way you sit in stillness, or how you listen without interrupting. Women perceive through intuition, and that intuition leads them to one place, the emotional world, a world where a simple nod, a well-timed silence, or a calm sentence can stay with them long after. A world where they don't feel judged, don't have to pretend, and are free to be who they truly are. And if you think attraction comes from what you try to perform, then what comes next may surprise you, because there is a kind of silent, enduring allure built from the way you show up, from how you are present, not loudly, but unmistakably. We're going to explore 12 things women often notice, not to evaluate you, but to feel whether you are truly there. Because in the end, it's not what you project that they fall for, it's how it feels to be near you. 1. The eyes, where women see if a man is truly present. If the first thing that comes to mind is that women notice a new haircut, an expensive watch, or a sharp outfit, then that may still be too superficial, because what women truly pick up on isn't the image, but the presence. Not whether a man is physically in the room, but whether he is truly there. And the eyes, that's where it all shows. No words are needed, no lingering stare, no attempt to get attention. Women don't want eyes that look at them as if they're searching for something. What draws them in is an eye that knows how to pause, unhurried, unafraid, and without demand. A quiet gaze, long enough to make her feel seen, yet gentle enough not to make her guard go up. That gaze carries safety, a silent kind of presence. And it's not some trick of body language. It's not a tactic. It's the inner state of a man who is grounded. A gaze that doesn't dart around, doesn't strain to impress, doesn't seek to control. Because in a world full of glances that barely linger, women remember the man who had the courage to stop and see them fully. 2. The smile, how a man shows he's at ease with himself. Some smiles make people uneasy because they come with a motive, a need to be liked, to be accepted, or to make someone else feel a certain way. But there are other smiles, softer, slower, with no specific purpose. The kind of smile that comes from a man who doesn't need a reason to smile, other than the fact that he's simply at peace with himself. Women feel that instantly, because that kind of smile isn't aimed at anyone. It's just the natural outcome of ease. A quiet moment of truth, when a man isn't trying to be interesting, isn't chasing attention. He's just smiling, because he feels right in his own skin, and that lack of effort, it makes the smile more captivating than any charming line ever could. Women aren't drawn to perfect smiles, they're drawn to honest ones. The kind of smile that says, "This man doesn't need to be seen to feel whole." That alone is enough to make her want to stay a little longer, because she's in the presence of someone who's already at home within himself. 3. The voice, where women hear the strength in a man's soul. If the eyes are where a woman senses presence, then the voice is what makes her want to stay, just to hear, to feel, not because of what is said, but how it's said. A voice doesn't need to be deep, nor should it be rushed. Its rhythm, steady, calm, and clear, carries the quiet confidence of a man who has nothing to prove. Women aren't drawn to voices that are too loud. They often signal hidden insecurity. Nor are they pulled in by voices that are too soft. They may hint at uncertainty, but a voice that's steady, grounded, and resonant enough to be heard without strain, that voice reveals the foundation beneath the man. It is presence, taking the shape of sound. A voice is like background music. It doesn't need to be the loudest thing in the room. It just needs to be in tune. Every syllable holds an unspoken message. I know who I am, and I'm in no rush. When a man speaks from that place of stillness, she doesn't just hear his words, she feels the roots of his composure. And when a man can make a woman feel safe just through the sound of his voice, sometimes he doesn't need to do anything more. He just needs to keep speaking like himself. 4. The way he stands, where women instantly sense his grounding. People often think attraction begins with action, but sometimes a man's stance alone is enough to catch a woman's attention. Not a stance that demands to be seen, not one puffed up to appear powerful, but a posture that is upright, natural, and unafraid. A stance that's rooted, with relaxed shoulders and a straight spine that's not rigid, as if the man's center of gravity comes from within. Women don't analyze this logically, they feel it. The way a man stands says a great deal about his awareness of himself, his mindfulness in the tiniest gestures, his ease without defense, yet without sloppiness. When he doesn't need to stand taller than anyone, doesn't rely on posture to prove anything, that's when the space around him instinctively opens, offering him a place of quiet trust. Not every gaze needs to be captured. Some men draw attention simply by standing still and being enough, because not every man who stands tall is truly grounded. Some may tower, yet feel hollow. Others barely take up space, yet their presence fills the entire room. 5. The way he dresses, where a woman sees if a man respects himself. Women don't expect men to wear designer clothes, but they can instantly feel it when a man takes care of his appearance, not to impress, but as a quiet extension of self-respect. Not for attention, but because he knows that how he shows up physically is part of his presence. A pressed shirt, clean shoes, balanced colors, not flashy, not sloppy, just tidy enough for people to feel at ease in his presence. Clothing doesn't define a man's worth, but it acts as a small mirror, reflecting how he treats himself. Does he believe he deserves to look put together? Does he value the moment of meeting another person? Or is he simply dressing to get it over with? Women notice these things quickly, and they're often drawn to men who don't dress to be admired, but dress to stay anchored in the world. The more grounded a man is on the inside, the less he needs to stand out on the outside. And that, paradoxically, is what makes him more memorable. A shirt doesn't make a man, but it can reveal a sense of inner clarity. The simpler the style, the more it requires discernment. and women see that very clearly. 6. How he speaks to the waitstaff, where she sees his true nature. One of the fastest ways a woman sees a man's true character is not how he treats her, but how he treats those who have nothing to offer him: the waiter, the security guard, the cashier, the everyday people who make life run quietly in the background. These are the ones who expose who a man really is. Some men are polite only when they're trying to gain something. Some appear kind, but their eyes or tone carry subtle disrespect. And then there are men who never change their demeanor, no matter who they're talking to, because their courtesy isn't strategic, it's simply who they are. Women with emotional intelligence pick up on this right away. They're not looking for a man who performs politeness. They're just watching. Does he respect people or only titles? And it's in those small, almost invisible moments, when he nods gently in gratitude, when he waits patiently without complaint, that she sees the core of his integrity. A man she can trust, not because he's flawless, but because he is kind, even when he doesn't have to be. Kindness toward those who don't matter is a test most men don't realize they're taking. But women, they're always watching, and they're rarely wrong. 7. The way he listens, where a woman knows if he truly cares. Many know how to speak, few truly know how to listen. And women, they're not moved by poetic words or clever lines, but by the feeling of being fully received. A man can make her feel heard, not through polite nods or canned advice, but by being completely present in that moment. That means his eyes aren't wandering, his hands aren't fiddling with a phone, his body isn't restless, waiting for his turn to talk. It means all of him, his gaze, his breath, his stillness, is attuned to what she's sharing. No interruptions, no inserting himself into the story, no urge to fix or define her emotions. This kind of listening cannot be faked. It comes from a man who has learned to sit with emotions without rushing to resolve them, and that quiet patience becomes something she instinctively trusts, because sometimes what touches her most isn't the response, but the silence filled with understanding. Listening is not a skill, it's a mirror, reflecting whether a man's inner world is strong enough to hold space for someone else. 8. His hands, where she sees a part of who he really is. People often notice the eyes, the smile, the voice, but sometimes what draws a woman in is something far simpler: the hands of a man, not because they're beautiful or strong, but because they tell a story. Clean, well-kept hands reflect care and discipline. Rough, sun-worn hands carry the marks of labor, of experience, and they too can be deeply attractive when they are authentic. Women aren't seeking perfection, they're drawn to truth. And hands, though silent, speak volumes. Do they move with urgency? Are they restless? Are they harsh? Or gentle enough to brush a strand of hair without making someone flinch? When a woman looks at a man's hands, she's sensing something deeper. Can I feel safe when he touches my world? And if the answer is yes, then those hands, doing nothing at all, become unforgettable. Because hands aren't just for holding, they're for keeping trust, keeping tenderness, keeping the quiet, meaningful things that words can never quite hold. 9. Scent, the trace that makes her remember him in her own intimate way. There are things you can't see, can't touch, yet they go straight into memory. Scent is one of them. Women have a special kind of memory when it comes to smell. She might forget what he said. She might even forget how the first date actually unfolded. But if he carried a soft, subtle scent, just enough to stir something deep inside. She'll remember, whether it's a few days, a few weeks, or sometimes a few years later. Scent isn't meant to impress. It's a quiet mark that a man leaves behind, a form of presence that doesn't require him to be near. It doesn't need to be strong. It doesn't have to be fancy. It just needs to be right and real. The scent of cleanliness, a touch of calm, a trace of memory. Scent has the power to reopen a chapter the mind can no longer name. And sometimes, just a breeze carrying a familiar scent can make her heart flutter without her knowing why. That's when she knows this man had once existed in her emotional space, and somehow he still does, in a way words were never meant to hold. Because sometimes what haunts her most isn't the image, but the fleeting scent that passed through a memory not yet closed. 10. Health, where a woman sees how a man treats himself. Women don't need a man with six-pack abs. What they sense more deeply is life itself, reflected in his eyes, revealed in the way he walks. It's not about muscle. It's the mark of someone who knows how to care for his body as part of his responsibility to live fully. A man who's disciplined in how he eats, sleeps, moves, not to become attractive, but simply because he respects himself. Health isn't measured by the number on the scale or how many times he hits the gym each week. It shows in his presence, alert eyes, steady breath, grounded steps. Women notice these things, not to judge, but to assess something more important. Does he care for himself enough to be able to care for someone else? Because when a man treats himself well, he's silently sending a message: I can be a safe place for another. And to a woman, that's always more alluring than any ideal body, because health isn't just physique, it's the energy he carries. A healthy man doesn't exhaust the people around him. On the contrary, he makes it easier to breathe. And more often than not, he makes people want to stay. 11. Focus, when she feels like the one who's been chosen. In a world full of distractions, focus has become a rare virtue, and one of the most precious gifts a man can give. When a man is truly present, not scrolling through his phone, not glancing around the room, not impatiently waiting for his turn to speak, but simply looking at the person in front of him, listening, letting time slow for a few quiet minutes, she will remember it for a long time. Because in that gaze, there isn't just attention, there's a silent affirmation. Right now, no one matters more than her. Women don't need someone to say, you're everything. They only need to feel that, in this very moment, they matter enough to deserve his full presence. Focus doesn't make noise. It doesn't require a technique, but it always makes people feel chosen. And when a woman feels like a priority, not through words, but through presence, that's when a real connection begins to take shape. Women can feel it when a man's attention is merely polite, but they can sense even more clearly when that gaze stays, not out of social courtesy, but out of a genuine desire to understand. That's the moment she starts to open up, without needing to be convinced. 12. The beauty of silence, a moment that makes her feel at peace. There is a special kind of beauty. Not every man has it. It's the ability to stay silent at the right time, not a cold silence, not indecision, but a stillness that comes from within. A man who doesn't rush to react, doesn't need to answer right away, but dares to pause before speaking, to understand what he's about to say, to ask himself whether it's even necessary. And sometimes, just the way he looks at her, unhurried, unwavering, is enough to make her feel safe, because that calm shows one thing: he's not being swept away by emotion, He doesn't throw himself into everything just to feel in control. He has enough inner space not to be drowned by words. In silence, women hear more than we imagine. And if a man can use silence as a place to connect, not a place to hide, then that very stillness becomes what makes her feel safe to stay. In that silence, she doesn't feel emptiness. She feels clarity, because the man who knows when to stay silent is usually the same man who knows how to stay steady when the storm comes. And she knows, in a world like this, he's one of the few with whom she doesn't have to say much to finally feel safe. Beyond everything women notice so quickly, from the way a man looks at her, smiles, speaks, listens, or treats others, there's something harder to name, but always felt. It's the feeling of true presence, not a behavior, not a gesture, but that unmistakable sense that the man is here, fully, attentively, without distraction or strain. And that, more than anything else, is what stays with her. Some men walk into a room and immediately try to draw attention. They talk loudly, laugh often, constantly move, as if every gesture, every word is calibrated to leave an impression. And then there are others. They don't try to do anything at all. They simply are, quiet, unforced, not trying to be interesting. And yet women notice them instinctively. They glance, they tune in, because that presence, silent as it is, pulls with a kind of gravity that feels real. The difference is this: one acts in order to be seen, the other simply shows up. And that grounded presence carries something no charming words can deliver: trust. The feeling of presence cannot be staged. It comes from within, from a man who is at peace with himself and thus has nothing to prove. He doesn't puff up to look confident, because confidence isn't found in words or posture. It's in the way he listens with his eyes, the timing of a single nod, the comfort of a silence that doesn't feel awkward. That presence makes a woman feel like she doesn't need to try harder, doesn't need to be on guard, because beside a grounded man, she's safe to just be. Attraction flows from state, not performance. A man might learn how to start a conversation, when to smile, when to step back. But if inside there's insecurity, all of that is just a polished shell around a hollow space. Women pick up on it immediately. They don't analyze its frequency. A man who is truly present isn't thinking elsewhere, isn't mentally strategizing, isn't pulled around by unresolved chaos. He's simply there, with her, fully. That kind of emotional frequency doesn't shout, it doesn't need to impress, but it makes her feel like she can breathe. It turns the conversation into a safe space. When a woman senses she can say something real without being judged, when she feels he's not trying to fix her feelings, but simply hold them, something deeper begins to form. And that can only happen when a man is in a true state, not performing, not pleasing, but showing up as himself, clear and rooted. Someone once said, women don't remember what you said, they remember how they felt around you. And that's the essence of presence. A man doesn't leave a mark by grand gestures, but by the stillness and peace he leaves behind in someone's heart. Picture two men in a cafe. One is talking with friends, animated, gesturing with his hands, laughing out loud. The other sits alone, a coffee in hand, looking out the window. And yet there's something about him that makes people turn their heads. It's not his appearance, it's his state. He isn't busy, he isn't showing off, but there's a quiet strength in him that makes people want to be quiet too. Women don't need men to act strong. They just want to feel that he's calm enough not to chase, clear enough not to confuse, and present enough not to make her feel alone, even when sitting side by side. True presence isn't something you can rehearse. It's the result of a journey inward, of accepting yourself, understanding what you need, and being willing to offer your presence as a gift. No pressure, no expectation. And when a man is in that state, he no longer asks, "What should I do to attract her?" Because he knows his presence alone, if strong enough, is already the answer. We've just walked through 12 subtle things women often notice in a man, from his eyes, his smile, his voice, the way he stands, to how he listens, how he treats the waiter, or the scent he carries. Each of those things works like a quiet instrument, helping to create impression, connection, and attraction. But without one essential element, all of it becomes performance. And that element is the feeling a woman has when she's with you. Because at the end of it all, what makes a woman fall in love is not what you do, but the emotional space you leave behind. It's the feeling of being able to be herself in your presence, not having to become someone else, not having to push to look better, be better, prove herself more worthy. Just a soft, silent exhale, because with you, she doesn't need to try so hard. Women fall in love with the peace you bring, the quiet steadiness that doesn't need to judge, the way you remain centered when they feel scattered, the kind of silence that doesn't make them feel abandoned. And above all, they fall in love with how you listen, not to give advice or fix, but simply to understand. They fall for the feeling of being chosen, not through promises, but through presence. In a world that moves too fast and speaks too loud, a woman remembers the man who made her feel like she could breathe. Not because he was the flashiest, the most successful, or the most poetic, but because he was the most real. With him, she felt like the fullest version of herself, something no one else had reached, and that no charm, no words, no grand gesture can replace. So if you're looking for something to grow into, something that draws her closer, something that makes her want to stay longer, begin from within, not with action, but with stillness, not to impress, but to be fully present for her and for yourself. Because the man a woman truly loves is not the one who made her heart skip at the start. He's the one she quietly, deeply, and undeniably cannot forget. If this spoke to something in you, feel free to leave a comment. I'd love to hear your story. And if you believe this message could help a friend, a brother, or a woman understand someone close to them a little more, share it. Because sometimes a single well-timed sentence can change how someone steps into love. And if you want to continue the journey of loving with more depth, more clarity, more presence, then I invite you to stay. The next videos will be the next steps on that path.